And in this tutorial, we'll be talking about PHP loops. Now, oftentimes when you write code, you want the same block of code to run over and over again a certain number of times to achieve a goal or a purpose. So instead of adding several almost equal code lines in a script, we can use what we know as loops. Now, loops are used to execute the same block of code multiple times, as long as a certain condition is true. Now, PHP has some basic loops, and we'll be looking at some of those loops here in the course of this tutorial. So, one of the loops which we'll be looking at is called while loop. While loop. While another one, do while. The third loop is called for loop. And the last but not the least is called for each. Now, these loops work differently. They work differently. The while loops, it loops through a block of code as long as the specified condition is true. Now, the do while loops, it loops through a block of code once and then repeats the loop as long as the specified condition is true. For the for loop, it loops through a block of code a specified number of times. Now, for the for each, it loops through a block of code for each element in an array. So, let's see these loops one at a time. So, the while loop loops through a block of code as long as the specified condition is true. So now let's really take a look at the basic syntax for the while loop. The condition, and then here the code to be executed. The condition here and the code to be executed in this block. So let's take an example. First of all, let us declare a variable which we will call number equals, let's take a value of 5. Now, what we want to do here is, while this number which we have here is less than or equal to 10, let us echo the number. So in this place, what we'll be doing is we're going to echo the number, and then we're going to be doing something else. We're going to increment the number. The number is, and then we just echo the number, and then we'll increase the number. So what we'll do here is we'll pass the variable, which is number, okay, increment that number. So we say number increase. Now, if you remember, when we talked about operators and we talked about post and pre-increment, here we are using post increment. If you've not watched that video, you could actually go back to my previous videos to see how post increment and pre-increment works. So let's test this line of code, and you see here that we have this block of code running this loop. Now the number is 5. It first calls 5, and then after it prints out this echo statement, it increases the number to 6, and it checks again. The number is now 6. It checks the number again. If 6 is less than or equal to 10, and since 6 is still less than 10, it prints again, and then it comes back to increase that number. So 6 plus 1 will now be 7. It will come back to this place and make this number 7. And then we'll call this while loop again. It will come back to this condition and check. 7 is still less than 10. So it's still going to echo this statement again. And that's how it does until it gets to 10, which 10 is not less than 10. And 10 is equal to 10. So it breaks out of this loop. And that is how the while loop works. Now, we can actually make these, we can change this digit here. We can change it to maybe 1. And you can also change this to maybe 5. Now, if we do that, we can say that we want to, okay, let's make this 50. And then we want to increase the output. We want to increase this number output by maybe 10. So how can we do that? We just say plus equal, and we had the number 10. So for every instance of these, let's make this 0, so we'll be getting 11. So for every instance, for every time this condition is checked, it will increase this number by 10. So if we save this code and run this code, you see what we get. The number is 0. It adds 10 to it after getting to this line. It becomes 10. It checks again. 10 is still less than 50. It prints again, 20. It comes here again, make this number 20. Check this condition again. And it's going to continue doing that until this condition is met. Even if you increase this to 100, you'll still get a good result. You can see it's printed 0 through 100. And that is how the while loop works in PHP. Now, let's check the do while loop. How does the do while loop work? The do while loops through a block of code once and then repeats the loop as long as the specified condition is true. How does this work? What is the basic syntax for doing this? Instead of while, we would first of all have do, okay? And then the code which we'll be executing will be here. And then we now have while, and then we have the condition. Now, after the condition, we just break out of the code. So this is the basic syntax for do while loop. Now, how does this work? It's very similar to what we've seen before. So let us say that let's put the same condition, which is number is less than or equal to 100. Okay? Now, the good thing about this is that it first of all prints out. Instead of 100, let's first try with 10. Okay? So it first of all prints out. It first of all commits to what is inside this block of code first before it now checks for the condition. That's the difference between do while and while loops. So here, let's just echo. Let's echo our string. The number is, let's say, the current number is, okay? Now we will put in the variable here, which is number, okay? And then we'll just break the line. And in this place, let's just increment the number. So here we increment the number and we'll say plus plus. All right? If we refresh this page now, we get the current number is 0, 1, 2, 3 through 10. If you put this to 1 and save, you will get from 1 through 10. This is how the do while loops work. Now, in a do while loop, the condition is tested after executing the statements within the loop. That means this condition is tested after this block of code is first executed. So that means that the do-while loop will at least execute its code once. It will execute the statement once, at least once, even if the condition is false. Now, let's see the practical example of this. In this place, let us put B as 8, okay? And then let's put this as 5. If we run this code now, you know, this number now is greater than this, okay? So this condition is definitely false. But now, if we run this code, you will see that this code actually runs one time. That means it first of all initialized, it passed this code before checking the condition. So it actually printed this block of code, okay, and then checked for this condition and discovered that, oh, the condition is false, so it stopped. But before it knew that the condition is false, it has already checked for this block of code. Now, if we use the same line of code in the while loop, you will see that our code would not even run at all. So let us say while, okay, and then let's bring in this condition, and then we bring this in. Now let's bring number as 8, just like we have in the previous one. So we have this now. If we save this, let us comment out this line of code and then refresh this page. You can see that we have nothing, because what this does is it first of all checks for this condition and then implements this code. But the contrary is the case for the do-while. For the do-while, it first of all executes this block. It first executes this block before even checking for this condition. So if we run this code now, we will get this done once. It will first of all check this condition, at least execute it once, before it will first of all execute this block of code at least once before checking this condition. And that's the major difference between while loop and do while loop. Now let's see how for loop works. For for loops, it loops through a block of code a specified number of times. And what's the syntax for writing for loops? For loops is just for So for the for loop, you have initial counter, which will be initiated, and you have the test counter, the initialized counter. This initialized counter, and then this increments the counter, and then executes the block of code. That is how the for loop works. So let's say for this, we could actually bring this in instead of having multiple lines. We can bring this into this place and say number is 0, okay? And we can say number so we have this number is 0. That's the first counter. That is the counter statement. It initializes the loop counter value. And then we are testing for the counter. So if number is less than 10, okay, now we are testing the counter. That is the second block of parameter. And then the third block is saying, after you test it, increment the value. That is what is happening here. So when you increment the value, just do what? Just echo the number. Okay, so now we are echoing the number. The number is just like we always do. Okay, number. And then let's break out of this line of code. So if we should test this now, if we run this code, you have these values. So you initialize the counter, which is the number, which sets to 0, okay? And then you test for that condition, which number, which is set to 0. You're testing it if it's less than 10, and then you're increasing the value by 1 each time this code is run. Now, we can actually increment this value by something higher than 1. We can make it 10 or 5, just like we did in the previous tutorial. So if we do this now and refresh this code, you see we have 0 and 5. So if we increase this to 50 and save and refresh, you will get 1, 0 through 45. And that is how the for loop works. So let's check the for each loop and see how it's being executed. Now, for the for each, the basic syntax for each is just for each. That is what you get. And how does this work? The for each loops work only on arrays, and it is used to loop through each key value pair in an array. So the for loop works with arrays. So how does the for loop work? Let's take an example. Let us say that we have fruits. We have fruits, okay? And in this fruit, we have the fruit is actually an array. So we are saying that this is what, let us say, mango. And I'm going to say watermelon. Now we are calling the fruit variable, and then we're making it run as value. Okay? So now all we need to do is just echo. We just echo the value. Let's say value, and then let's just give it a break. Okay? So with this, what we are doing here is that we have assigned this array into this variable fruit, and we are using a for each loop to print out each of the fruits in this array. So if we save this code and then we refresh our page, we should get the list of all our fruits. You see that? That is how for each loop works. For each loop is used only on arrays. Take one more example. I could say age, and here I can just here I could say student. Okay, so here I can say students also, and then here I could say as key to value. Okay, and here I can say students, and I can say David. And for David, let's say David let's say David scored 60 marks. Okay, and for Stella, let's say Stella scored 58 marks. And then let's say Steve scored 57 marks. Okay. And you can see here that we have printed all of the marks. Okay, we printed all of the marks using the student variable as the key to value. So let's talk about break statement. Now, you've already seen break statement in the switch. You've already seen how break work in the switch statement. We have used the break statement in the earlier tutorial while we were using the switch statement. Now the break statement can also be used to jump out of a loop. Let's see how the break statement works with loops. So let us use, in this example, we're going to be using for loop. Okay? So let us use the for loop. Let's say for. And then here, we're just going to say I is less than 10. And we're going to increase I. And then let's check for a condition and say if. Okay, you know we're using I as a variable. So if I is equal to 5, immediately I gets to 5, just break out of it. Break out of this loop. Okay? Now, but definitely just echo number is, and then we'll give it we'll pass the high value, okay, and then we'll break. So if we save this and then we refresh this page, you can see here now that it actually breaks out of here. Now, if I comment out this break and I refresh, you can see that it ran the loop until it got to 10 before it stopped, despite the fact that we have a conditional statement in here. But because there is no break statement, it doesn't stop. It just runs the loop until this condition is met. So this is break statement, and apart from break statement, we also have continue statement. Okay, so instead of having break here, it will put continue. The loop will continue to execute. Okay, so if we refresh, you can see that continue. It continues despite. So if I is 5, instead of breaking out, it continues, and then you don't see 5 here. You only see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 5, it continues on 5, so you print 6, 7, 8, 9. And that is how the break and the continue statement works. Now you can also use break and continue in while loops. You know, this is for loop. The same method is applicable to the while loop. So if I want to change this, if I want to work on this, I could say while. And when I say while, I could just say, I could cut this out and then bring this, cut this here. Okay. So I've declared the variable I, and then I want to increment that variable. Okay, I've put the condition. Here is the condition. All right, and then I'm using the continue now in the while loop, and here I just want to increment the value of I. So, and you can see here that it has actually broken out of this loop once it got to 5. For this, use the continue statement. To use the continue statement, you have to increment the value before you continue. Okay, you have to increment the value after your if block, then you increment the value, then you continue, and then you output your value and increment it. So that is what is playing out here in this code. We're using the while loop with the continue statement. Now, when we use the break statement, we didn't have to increment our I value here with the break statement. Here is the break, and we didn't have to increment our value. You see that? But if you want to go with the continue statement, if you want to use the continue statement in the while loop, you have to increment your value first and then continue to make that loop work. So you see that it's jumping out of 5. It's jumping out of 5. So that's going to be the end of the tutorial on loops, and I'll see you in function.